The following is a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
Welcome to the System is Down.
You guys remember back when you used to hate Monday mornings? Yeah, that was back before you discovered this show. You see, I do this show for you guys, because I know that you're probably listening to this on your commute back into the weekly grind, and just want you to start your week out right with some uncomfortable conversations. You're welcome. What's up, Downers? Welcome back to the least comfortable show on the web. The System is Down. My name is Dan Smots, and this is the place where we talk about all the uncomfortable topics like conspiracies, politics, and yes, religion. And if you're new here, I would highly recommend you go find the person who invited you and give them a firm but friendly slap on the behind, because today I talked to Alex Jones' ex-wife. That's right. Today's episode is my discussion with the lovely and very sweet and kind Kelly Jones. And I say it like that because you might find it a little surprising that she's such a nice person, because she was married to Alex Jones. Can you even imagine what that's like? Anyway, Kelly is currently going through a insane custody battle, trying to get her kids back from a madman who is putting her through the ringer and making her life hell, from what it sounds. We talked about that, and we talked about what it's like to be married to Alex Jones. We also dug into the conspiracy stuff and the shill allegations and whether or not his products are snake oil, and I even brought up Bill Hicks, but all that stuff is in the second half of this conversation, which you can get access to by joining the Downers Club. The Downers Club is our patron program. It is what helps keep the lights on and helps keep the show getting bigger and better and getting more awesome, amazing guests like Kelly Jones. And you can sign up for that for less than a cup of coffee a month by going to tsidpod.com/support, and in return, you get multiple bonus episodes of this show every single week, and access to the exclusive Downers Club Facebook group, and just a whole bunch of fun stuff. So, once again, go to tsidpod.com/support and hear the rest of this interview with Kelly Jones now. All right, let's get into it. This is my conversation with Kelly Jones. Let's get weird. My guest today is family court justice activist, journalist of CustodyWars.com, and ex-wife of a notorious madman, Kelly Jones. How are you doing?
Hey, Dan, I'm doing okay. How are you today?
As I told you beforehand, our podcast we focus on all the uncomfortable topics that most people don't like to talk about, like conspiracies, politics, and religion. And who better to have on than the ex-wife of Alex Jones to talk about all three of those things? I think that you fit pretty well into those. So just give me a little background on you. I always like to get people's backgrounds and their kind of upbringing to see, if that plays into where they are in today, and if it does or not, it doesn't matter. But give me some background of your upbringing.
Well, we're coming off of Mother's Day, and that's a good question to ask, right? Because, you're looking at social media, and one of the things that these hashtags that trend was things I got from my mother. And I just had one word to say about that, is that I got grit. I was raised to be a person who was independent and a thinking person. And I have always had a heart for activism. So I have found myself in the situation that I'm in, which is really, people like to think of me as Alex Jones's ex-wife, and I talk about that a lot. But really what I'm trying to do is to bring the story of what happened to me as an example of what happens to so many in family court forward. And so my upbringing had a lot to do with that. I was raised by, my parents were involved in, maybe had different politics that I have now, but they're relatively political people. I actually grew up In Austin, I'm one of the firstborn, like the only Austin originals left, or one of the few. But shortly, when I was around like 9 years old, I moved to Europe. So I grew up in Europe. I've traveled a lot in my life, and I've been exposed to a lot of different cultures and people. And I think I just have had kind of a unique, obviously, experience, but bringing it back to the fact that where I'm at now, that was so long ago, right? I just think of myself as a mom. Like, you become this adult person. And as a mom, I find myself here today, unfortunately, still battling for my children, even after a jury verdict in family court. So the convictions that I have that come from this upbringing of sort of activism and political interest surround this core issue of family court corruption. And the real tragedy is that the family court system is sorely, sorely broken, and it involves sort of a series of referrals or possible conflicts of interest often that lead to great bias in family cases, which is done at great expense to parents and ends up breaking relationships, which is really what happened in my case.
Sure. Absolutely. Did you, before this, this falling out with Alex, did you do activism work in this area before that, or did this kind of jumpstart it for you?
Well, I think, I mean, my background is, again, pretty unique. Like, I was definitely in college, your typical kind of college involved activist. It was a long time ago. It was when the Gulf War was going on. And so I was protesting during that. But when I graduated from college, shortly after I graduated, I moved back to Europe for a while, and I worked in film and casting. But when I came back to the States, I actually got a job working for PETA, of all things. And that's where I really got my true exposure to how people can do simple actions or take specific examples and really generate a lot of media interest around it. So back then we didn't have social media, we didn't have the internet, so everything was mainstream media. So you do sort of a grassroots media action, like hold a protest or do a banner hang, or even just go talk to students or something like that, and it would generate a lot of press. And so that's the background that I brought actually when I met Alex. So I had returned to Austin, and I was working for the TV studio where I actually met Alex. I think I worked there after I met him, but I was eventually hired by them. And he said, leave all that and come to work for me. And I think he had like 1 hour a night on KJFK, a little affiliate on like Sunday or something, and was working, I think, still in his dad's dental office maybe, or I don't recall exactly what he was doing at that time that I met him. But at the very beginning of our relationship, we were just living together and doing this business, I guess, out of a tiny, little home in South Austin. And I did use the skills that I had to help Alex get a lot of publicity at the beginning. And he was a very different guy back then too,
Sure. Were you still, I have to ask, were you still involved with the PETA stuff when you met him? Because, I mean, you got to see like kind of the irony in caveman Alex getting involved with somebody in PETA.
Well, I mean, no, I absolutely wasn't. I had left PETA and I had returned to Austin. I left PETA really actually pretty disgusted with it, because over the course of time, I really began to appreciate that it felt like really like a cult, right? Like it was really weird. And that the things that I understood, like I love animals, we all love animals, right? And I was not a vegan before I moved up to work for PETA. I was a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian like most of my life. I just really don't like to eat meat or whatever. I eat some now, but when I was working for them, I sort of like morphed into this job where I was the girl who could, I guess, get things done for them. So I was the girl who, put a pie in the face of Oscar de la Renta. I was the girl who threw a raccoon on the plate of Anna Wintour, which, they acted as if these were like independent acts, but they totally sent me there to do that. Right. And I really didn't like it. I was really uncomfortable confronting people in that way. And it really actually bothered me. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And they're like, well, because I could, I guess, accomplish these feats, whatever they were, which in this day and age, obviously you couldn't do. It's almost like, what are you setting somebody up to go harass somebody or something, right?
Right.
But I just was disgusted by the time I left there. And in fact, just one of the things that really bothered me the most was I had uh, good friend there, and she had this dog that she got, and the dog was like scared when he saw her, so she would like pee on the floor, which is just sad. It was like a really traumatized dog,
Mhm.
and they put him down. Like they kill healthy animals. They're anti-human and anti-animal. So they follow the philosophy of this guy Peter Singer, which you don't know until you're like in it, and you're like, what? And apparently, this guy is somebody who doesn't even think that disabled humans have value. So it's very disturbing. I got out of there pretty much as quickly as I could.
Yeah.
And I moved back to Austin at the same time. Around that time, my best friend was in hospice. So I came back to be there for that. And that's when I met Alex.
Mhm. Sure. So, what was kind of your role? What was your family dynamic with Alex in the early years, possibly even before you had kids? You guys, you worked together in the business sense too, right?
Well, I mean, pretty much the second I said, okay, I'll leave my job and work for you, I was just like pretty much in a house by myself all the time with Alex or
Mhm.
alone working. Like I worked, 10 to 12, 15 hours a day sometimes. I was his producer. I was his publicist. I was his mail order fulfiller. I was his phone answer. I was, at the beginning, I did everything because we didn't have a staff. Over time, we would get a staff, but I pretty much was just always working, and it was not a very happy existence, actually. And I was really not happy even at that juncture in our relationship. But I was pretty much isolated from, my older friends and family. My best friend had just passed away.
Mm.
And so I was just in this weird, really not good situation. And I guess I felt pretty trapped, but I did it, I stayed there.
Sure. And I've heard you talk on other podcasts and other interviews, and you talk about, I mean, it comes as no surprise that um, you feel like Alex Jones had some sort of, mental issues and anger and aggression, obviously. What was there a point where that started to be more obvious, or was he just kind of always that way?
Well, I want to be clear when I talk about Alex, and really the only reason why I've come forward publicly, Dan, and I think that some of this has gotten lost in translation,
Sure.
is because I'm convicted that the extreme example that my case is in family court, where you have a very obviously unhealthy, unwell person, which is a tragedy, right? That's not like me saying, oh, you suck or you
Hmm.
know, hate you or whatever. It's a really sad situation. It's a mean situation. It's not like it's a nice, but um, I have really come forward about Alex because I want people to understand that in my case, and what happens in custody cases, and especially in high dollar custody cases, is that experts, they're called experts. I think they'd be better referred to as junk service providers, come into the mix and are at great expense hired to come between you and your ex or your
Hmm.
divorcing spouse and determine who's the better parent or who's a good parent or if you're good at all or whatever. And so this is it's pretty shocking for people to hopefully understand. Maybe they can understand through your show, Dan, that in my case, all of the concern was focused on me when I said, this guy has done these horrible things to me in our relationship, and I'm just trying to get out. And I was gaslit, which means they tell you that you're crazy or they treat you as if you're crazy when you're not. I was victim shamed, in this era of Me Too. I don't think that would necessarily happen in the same way that it did back then, although I do know it's presently happening to other people with the same experts who still walk the street in Austin, Texas, unbelievably, because they're really, truly corrupt. There are experts in my case who have admitted receiving kickback payments from other experts they've referred.
Really?
There's experts who have told supervisors on my case they didn't want me to get my kids back because then I wouldn't have any money. But all of these people had no concern about Alex Jones. I mean, really. And the things that have come out publicly, I just use this as an example. In the past month, Alex was on the air drunk and raging, screaming, F Trump, F
Yep.
this, F that, right? Simultaneously talking about shoving things up people's bodies,
Hmm.
talking about actual sex acts while my child was in the studio,
Really?
while my son was in the studio. And I believe with all my heart that Alex was completely wasted that night. You can see him shoving furniture and engaging in rage. And he drove my child, my son, up to the studio in that state and engaged in that behavior in front of him.
Gotcha.
And nobody cares. That's all. I guess just no problem. No, it's a huge problem. My children have been left in a horrible situation by a grossly negligent judge who's superseded the jury's decision with great bias to leave them in this. And now Alex has filed to sue again for child custody. Alex, you asked me a question, Dan, and I kind of wandered off, right?
That's all right.
To help people understand how this situation is crazy, right? It's crazy to think that all the focus was on me and not on him, right?
Right.
And I have a lawsuit, Dan, out there for defamation. And I'm not talking just the defamation he did on YouTube. I'm talking the defamation he did of me to my children, which is disgusting and horrific. And it's called parental alienation. And there's so much evidence that that type of severe psychological abuse was engaged in. I'm talking defamation to the school, to these experts. I mean, a course of conduct with highly paid, like his employees involving themselves is horrific.
Absolutely.
So, well, thanks for your empathy.
I see. I mean, Alex Jones has become, I mean, everybody sees this guy. They see him on TV, on the internet and everything. They see him as like a caricature of like conspiracy people. And he's like this crazy, funny guy who, you know, blows his lid every now and then. And it's a laughable thing. But, you know, you think about, nobody really thinks about, even when he brings them on the air, nobody really thinks about Alex Jones as a dad, as a, you know, a mentor to these kids. And it's just a sad thing to, you know, take this crazy fireball and think he's raising your children. That's horrifying.
Well, you know, all kids deserve and need a father. And it's my strongest hope for him to be involved in their life. You know, unfortunately, the way he's involved now is very toxic and it's terrible. My children really are in a bad situation. My hope and my request to the jury was for an injunctive period of time for him to seek assistance, to learn how to not be an alienator, and I didn't indicate it there, but I mean, it's pretty obvious. I think it's pretty evident. My feelings are, my impression are, my impressions are, my belief is that he's just really descended in the past even half year into like and longer, but particularly recently into an incredibly alcoholic state. And it's a horrific thing. Alcoholism is a horrible disease. You know, God bless those people who have it. There's help out there to be sought, but you have to admit you have a problem.
Right.
And to think that, this is evident to me. I don't know if it is to you, Dan, when I'm seeing him like on the air slurring his words and unable to
deny.
talk. And my experience of him, of course, is anchor, right? Like, well, and he's like toasting alcohol on the show and stuff, like bragging about being able to drink a whole bottle of Jack Daniels at a time or getting wasted with Joe Rogan. I mean, these things are, he's doing it, right?
Right.
So it's a sad situation. I think one of the things I really feel like in our relationship, and I want to come back to the conspiracy thing you said too, because I want to tell people a little bit about my politics, because I think people are a little bit like off, don't really understand where I'm coming from. And I get that. Right. But at the beginning of our relationship, I mean, one of the things that came out, and it's been reported on, so I can say it, is that Alex has narcissistic personality disorder, right? That's a pretty serious diagnosis. It has to do with being unable to have empathy. Everything is about self, but it comes from a really broken place. So it's really sad. I think one of the things I struggle with the most actually is having too much empathy for Alex. And because I also see what my kids are going through and how that's hurt them actually so much psychologically, which is really hard to be around. It's really hard to be around. And they're still beautiful, wonderful, genius kids, but they have had a lot of trauma in their life from this system and from what they've been put through by the experts and by Alex and his emissaries and entourage and all that. But at the beginning in a narcissistic relationship, it's all happy. I mean, he was really like almost worshipful of me, right? Like he was like, which I should, maybe that's not the best thing. Sure. If you see somebody being like too like into you, that's right. an issue. Like, but it was a tough time in my life. And then from the get-go, there were really red flags that I saw that I just kind of ignored. I'm like, whatever. And I was also a lot less, I guess I was in a way pretty immature, for the age I was when I met him. I was still just kind of living kind of fancy free. I'd always traveled a lot in my life and been kind of an adventurer, so, but pretty quickly over time, the signs warned, sort of morphed into real meanness. And and isolation and manipulation and cruelty. But he is a really good manipulator, right? Like he's able to convince a lot of people of a lot of crazy things.
Oh yeah,
So
clearly.
that's how a gaslighter works. They work on your own perception of self, right? So I really started doubting myself. And then, fast forward a few years, I was always pregnant pretty much, or had a young baby on my hip. And, 4 or 5 years into the relationship, I really had lost completely like this independent kind of world traveling person that I was. When I was with Alex, we never flew one time in an airplane, not once. And I was with him for 15 years, except we did go to the California thing. But once we were married with kids for 12 years, never flew in an airplane. It was really like, the more I really think about it, and I'm still actually trying to leave it, Dan, because my everyday life, I wish people, I can't show people what I'm working on, but I was tied up in court. Every day I have paperwork to do and filings to deal with and going through, and I'm rereading all this stuff, which is horribly traumatizing. It's very hard. But when I literally look back on it, it was really pretty obvious how terrible it was. I just got so isolated. And I think that's what happens in a domestically abusive or violent relationship,
Yeah.
So, but what I was going to say at the beginning, he was pretty involved with the birth of my first child. He was around some, he wasn't involved like most parents would be, like getting up in the night. I don't think he ever really did that ever, even once, or changing diapers, but he was trying to play the family man a little bit. My second child came a little bit less. And then fast forward, about the time of her birth or shortly after is I think when he really started drinking again. He started getting a lot more famous. And it was just by the time my third child was born, he just was gone. He was gone all the time. And so that's the story.
Yeah. So what was the final straw? At what point did you decide that you've had enough?
Well, I tried to leave him many times. In fact, I actually filed for divorce, I think, for the first time in 2005. I was really isolated, and I was also, I contend that I was pretty much brainwashed. He's a cultist. I feel like one of the things he always did talk about back then was CPS. And he said if I ever tried to leave him, that CPS would take the children and I'd never see them again, which is interesting that he knew this information, because I didn't even know that you could actually lose your kids. Like, I didn't have any reference for that.
Why was he saying? What was his reasoning for thinking that the children would get taken away if you left him?
That the whole world's against us, just that if you tell people, like if I went to a battered women's shelter, or if I went to seek help, and I'm not alleging a ton of physical violence, but there was some, most of the abuse was other kinds of abuse, like the Me Too and the psychological abuse. But, just basically that the whole world was against us, and, me and you against the world. And if you leave, they'll all come and get the kids or something like that, which sounds kind of ridiculous, but I don't know.
He says a lot of ridiculous things, so it's not that unbelievable.
it's having experienced like a relationship where you're really gaslit and emotionally abused. It's really hard to explain to people how somebody with like, an educated background or a normal person can find themselves in that, but it does happen. So.
Hey, Dan Smots here. I'm taking a second to interrupt myself talking to talk about myself because, I don't get paid a penny for the hours and hours that I put into creating this show for you guys in your greedy little ears, and I've got a family to feed. To make that happen, I run my own media business called Goulash Media. If you have a need in anything from video production to graphic design to audio production and beyond, you can get it all for a painfully fair price at Goulash Media. In video, I do weddings, music videos, commercials, pageants, plays, etc., etc., etc. For design, I do photo editing, album art, logos, branding, business cards, merchandise, you name it. For audio, I do engineering, production, editing, jingles, and, well, podcasts. So if you've got a media need of any kind, or if you'd just like to give a little something back and help keep my children fed, check out all the endless options at my website, goulashmedia.net. That's goulash, Goulash, media.net, where we cater to the little guy with the big vision. Okay. So, I'm sure a lot of people that aren't, hardcore Alex Jones listeners probably don't even know about this custody battle and the stuff that's going on with that. Can you give us kind of a quick rundown of what you've been put through with this?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if there's a quick version of
Give
it.
us the long one then. If
Okay.
you've told the story many times, I don't want to force you
I don't
to
think
go
anybody's
through it,
ever
but
actually asked for the real story of
okay.
it. So I've told bits and pieces. And again, I want to bring it back to the real core issue, which is court corruption. I think a lot of people are interested in me because they want the dirt on Alex Jones. And then I get a lot of flack from people saying, oh, it's sour grapes. And how could she air their dirty laundry? I don't want to be doing this. Okay. But 4.5 years after I
He's
filed
been
for
doing it the
divorce,
whole time too. I've seen him,
well,
going
yeah,
on and
for all
ranting
this
about it.
time after the divorce, I am still fighting to get my kids back. And now I have no money. I have more money than a lot, but not the kind of money you need to litigate against Alex
Right.
Jones. I'm in a really different situation with that. But mostly I just want to I want a life. I'm still trying to leave Alex Jones, basically.
Right.
I'm still trying to get away from my abuser. And what has happened is that the family court and corrupt experts create a playground for bullies to control and abuse their ex-spouses or divorcing spouses. So when I filed for divorce finally in 2013, December, I'm pretty sure he was planning for the divorce to happen himself, because I'm pretty sure he already had his new wife, girlfriend then, right? The businesses were completely restructured without my knowledge or permission. And I was the primary owner or managing member, I guess is what it was called. So they formed secret businesses behind my back to supplement businesses. I had said, no, hey, I don't want to sell supplements. Like, why are we selling supplements?
Right.
We have tons of money. That's not what we do. And so Alex and his dad went behind my back with our own attorney and formed businesses that diverted millions and millions of dollars away from our estate. But by the time I filed for divorce, things had gotten so bad. Like, he was just actively harassing me, making fun of me with my children, like doing a lot of pre-alienation stuff, which is actually what happens a lot in domestically violent relationships. It was sort of the day, I remember the day when my son started emulating a lot of his behaviors. And I had said, oh, Alex is not around that much, because when he wasn't around, I mean, we were at school, we were at swim team,
Right.
we were at gymnastics, dance, hanging out with their friends, soccer team, whatever.
Normal family life.
Yeah, like a normal family life. So when he wasn't around, it was pretty relatively normal, kind of single mom kind of thing, I guess. I had some help sometimes. But when he started, it really amped up to where he was just, when he was around, it was so bad. And then I saw my son doing it and I was like, okay, this lie that I'm culpable for, by the way, like responsible for, like, it's hard to look at yourself like that, but I'm responsible for staying in the relationship way too long. And I don't know how to come from this from the correct point of advocacy as a survivor of domestic violence and abuse, but it is really hard to leave. So I try to have empathy with myself, but I look back and I wish I had tried harder. And I hope that if anybody's watching this and you think you might be in a domestically violent or abusive relationship, or if somebody's trying to make you feel like your perceptions are not correct or there's something wrong with you, you're crazy or unstable or something, and you're not, I mean, at your heart, like, search your heart, pray, meditate, whatever it is, and understand that you probably are in a domestically violent relationship, because tons of people are, both men and women, mostly women. And it's a horrific thing to be in. So I stayed in too long. When I saw my son emulating some of the behaviors, I said, that's it. This joke this lie you've been telling yourself, that your kids are not experiencing this, like you think, that it's all hidden, is a big lie. I saw that show, was it Little Lies, Sweet Little Lies, or it's a great show. It's got like Nicole Kidman in it, and it does a fantastic way of showing what it's like to be in a domestically violent relationship.
Yeah.
That dynamic was a little bit different there, but she's thinking, oh, we're in this together kind of thing, and but the truth is that the kids are picking it up, and it's
Right.
a horror. So I finally filed in December 2013. You asked for the story. I filed collaboratively. I found I was terrified to just file. In fact, before that, I had written agreements with him, like, please move out, let's seek counseling. Like, I really tried to seek counseling with him. Like my foundation, the fundamental person of who I am is I'm a Christ follower. I try not to say Christian, although Christ follower sounds kind of culty or weird,
Sure.
but because Christians have a really bad name, and partially because of people get on the air and say hate and horrible things and then use God's name to perpetuate that information.
Sure.
So I follow Jesus and his teachings, and really wanted to keep our family together. And so I sought counseling. Prior to filing, I actually allowed myself to go to church because he would never let me go to church. He said, "Oh, let's do a home Bible study all the time." Really, was really good at isolating. And I think he's really doing that right now with my kids in their other home.
Did he have reasons for not wanting to go to a local church?
Well, he didn't want me to do anything. I mean, he didn't want me to wear my hair down. He didn't want me to wear contact lenses. I mean, he didn't want me to, I'm a tap dancer. I started dancing. He didn't want me to dance. He didn't want me to, literally he didn't want me to do anything really.
Oh.
In fact, I was so isolated, Dan, by the time that, that I was going into town for court and stuff. I was like, oh, Austin's really gotten to be big city. I mean, I was just really out, I was doing my mom circuit, swimming pool, I mean, we went downtown, but not, I wasn't in the life, I was isolated away.
Right.
So I tried to seek counseling. I went to church, and actually that's where I first spoke to my church, and I said, what do I do? I'm in this relationship and it's terrible. And I followed their advice, which was to divorce him. And I've actually been in a lot of contact with the church, and I've had some good prayer support. But I said, man, don't tell anybody that anymore in this town until we get the family court situation cleaned up. Because what happened was, in the collaborative process, which is how I filed, which is a mediation style process where you try to come to agreements and work it out. Alex broke every agreement. He was coming in the home and harassing me when he wasn't supposed to be there. He took my dog. He took my, artwork. He was he was engaging with me in a bizarre way in front of the children still. And there was a culminating incident that I won't talk about here that resulted in me saying, listen, if you can't follow these agree that you're going to follow these basic rules, I'm going to have to go to litigation. Right. And he laughed at me and rocked back and showed me his teeth. And I filed for a divorce and went into litigation. And at that time, I was still homeschooling my kids 5-6 hours a day. I was a homeschool mom, part-time. That we did a partnership school. Homeschooling was his idea, right? My kids at that point watched no TV basically at all. They weren't they still had a relatively normal life, but it was very much like I was always interacting with them basically. So I was always tied up with my kids doing stuff. It came to a mediated settlement agreement, a mediation. So we went into this mediation, and I had horrible, horrible, horrible advice. Actually, when I went into litigation, I was referred to an attorney who told me, give me all this dirt, anything you have on Alex. And I had a lot of dirt, right? But I just didn't want to do that. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so I've looked back at that moment so many times in my life and thought, wow, if I had just done that, it would have been so different, right? Because I ended up losing my kids. I ended up losing all but some horribly disproportionate settlement that is just so absurdly disproportionate. I don't even know how to describe it, but I think my net worth now is probably maybe 1/100th of what his is or something like that. And I have no, and that's a guess, but I have no income, and it's hard for me to generate income. It's hard for me to even figure out AdSense or whatever for custody wars when I'm doing my legal stuff all day long. But I know, I come back to my faith. I believe that I've had to go for this for a reason. Because I believe that what happened to my kids and how I survived this and how I'm still here talking to you is I believe that it's going to matter, because my example is so extreme. I'm the one person of hundreds of thousands of people in America who lose their kids to family court injustice, who lost them to Alex Jones, who is notoriously out of control and just considered by many to be just a horrifically hateful and dangerous person. So I believe that my story can and will matter. And that's how come I'm still in it today, because I tell you what, and because of God, because without that, there's no way I would have survived what I went through. I went through degradation, false accusation, watching my children being medically and neglected and physically neglected and abandoned to bizarre situations and exposed to adult information and content I will not share with you here, and left with untreated broken bones and untreated pneumonia and things like that, that a parent can even, you can't even express how awful it is to see that happening and to not be able to do anything about it. And how come I couldn't do something about it was because a horrible, irresponsible, malpracticing attorney recommended to me to get a guardian ad litem, which is supposed to represent the best interests of a child. And in this state, in this town, there are I can't tell you how many people I know who are in a horrible situation with a guardian ad litem or somebody that's acting in the guise of a guardian ad litem, because in Texas, they have no oversight. They have no standard course of conduct. The guardian in my case was so biased and so grossly negligent, it's indescribable, to the point that her negligence was traumatic to me. And what was happening, and get this, my son, I was going to say my kids, but it was really my son, was told to record me with a camera at all times. So I had a video camera in my phone in my face at all times, and my kids were showing up upset and distressed and freaking out about the things that were going on. And I was terrified because he would come and it would look like it's me, right? Like my own child is doing this. But the most horrific thing is not what somebody could think about you. It's knowing that your child, my son, adored me. He loved me. My son and I were incredibly close. Alex didn't have anything to do with him. Knowing that that child who's wanted his father's attention his whole life is now getting it because he's an agent to try and harm his mother. It is the sickest thing ever. And it was encouraged by this guardian. And the guardian has admitted that she committed perjury about lies about me that were not true, that she put in my that she gave to the psychiatric evaluator, whatever, that were in her recommendation report. I've had false CPS reports issued on me, lies, just flat out lies. Meanwhile, Alex had only wanted the kids less than standard possession, which is less than every other weekend. He got a 1-bedroom apartment. He didn't even I have 3 kids. Right. He got a 1-bedroom apartment. And yet this woman came in and she said, oh, how about 50-50 kids? She started presenting this concept to them. They had never spent any time with him at that juncture, anywhere close to even standard possession time, anywhere near that.
They were probably excited to get to spend more time with dad finally.
Maybe, and maybe with, the suitcases of candy that the grandparents were bringing, and then the simultaneous overlay of the brainwashing and toxic messages they were relaying about me, that I caused the divorce, that I was basically, they made me behind everything. And then the experts that came in that were put on the case by that central first guardian, who then would later, there it goes again. So the experts that came into place that were put on by that guardian that kind of went down the line were handpicked by her, By the way, one of them received some suspicious $22,000 of payment from Alex for 2 months' work when he was charging $200 an hour to see my son maybe 4 times a month. I don't know what that is. I'm not alleging anything, but it seems very questionable.
Right.
So parental alienation is really what I've been outspoken about. It is a systematic brainwashing of one parent to turn the children against another parent. It happens all the time. People know this happens in divorce, right? But it's more than that. It's more toxic than that. It's everything that they do is a manipulation, either to show some deficiency of the parent or to feed them some sort of encrypted message within another, just discourse about, oh, well, we don't do that at our house, or removing photographs of the other parent, or just outright lying or saying horrible things. I mean, I had my daughter at the time, 6 years old, come up to me, I think she was 6, and say, Mama, Daddy says you threw a book at me, but you didn't. And can you imagine that? And these are the things. So I went from being the soccer mom, swim team mom, by the way, his parents, oh, you're the Madonna, you're the best mother ever. Nobody's as good a mom as you. I mean, everybody, Thanksgiving, me with the turkey, waiting on everybody. It's really horrible, actually. It's really sad when I think about it, but it really actually gross.
It's more gross to think about that, none of that matters in this case. Well, what is the reasoning? Like, how did he end up with the kids after all this?
because the guardian was hostile to me. She's a biased, horrible guardian. And interestingly enough, her name is Allison Wilcox, by the way. If you're in Austin, Travis, or Hayes County and have had Allison Wilcox harm you in your case or act with gross negligence in your case, please contact me. You can reach me at media@custodywars.com. And that's just a little shout out to all the people there. Also, if you've had Alyssa Sherry on your case, please contact me. And so it's actually good that I'm doing that, Dan. You know why? Because I have actually joined with so many people across the country, but also in Texas who have had these same bad actors. So it's definitely not just me. There's people that act repeatedly with bias against people, and they're put in place by high dollar attorneys, the same high dollar attorney putting the same expert in place over and over again, giving them a job that, for instance, in my case, the subsequent case manager who presented herself to be a guardian, which she was not, required a $40,000 a month retainer. You do the math on that. A month. I mean, that's people's yearly, a lot of people's yearly or whatever. It's highly lucrative for them. They don't have any oversight. And this woman was just so biased. I mean, what she ignored is shocking. And Alex could do no wrong. He would send me horrible, hostile, paranoid texts. She got them, no problem. I would miss one of the phone calls that were set up, and I was like Satan. And he would get like 20 phone calls a month, and I would get like 3. And I wouldn't miss it anyhow, or I'd be late, and it'd be like, you weren't at the phone where your ex-husband wanted you to be. Basically, it's like she endorsed, encouraged my ex-husband to control me still, and encouraged my children to do that. Camera in my face against the law, intercepting documents that were from my attorney that were confidential. And the culminating incident, so after 10 months, it took about 10 months after her being on, and this whole time we had started, the kids were with me. I mean, my little girl was like frantic, did not want to go away. She'd never stay with her dad. And I mean, he's drinking and stuff, he's Alex, like he's always working and yelling. And I mean, there would be like, even the simplest things back then, like if I knew, like if you're planning a divorce too, by the way, if you want to feed your kids organic or low sugar, or if you think that they shouldn't watch scary movies on TV, just forget about that mattering in family court, because it doesn't. I mean, I was really a conservative lady, had been encouraged to be that, but really, I mean, I guess I adopted that, my kids max like PG, movies. They were watching R-rated horror films, all this crazy crap. I would be movies of them in the car, like banging their heads to heavy metal. Like my little 6-year-old, the nanny took a video, like got up in a bench, like a porch swing, and she said the F word, and she just said it like it was like how you say it. And she was 6 years old, and that child never heard that word from my household. And it was just like a horror. So this is all happening. I'm seeing my kids horribly traumatized, turn against me. I mean, my youngest particularly was still really connected with me and like wanted to be with me. And my son was mad at her about that. She showed up with huge bruises and scratches on her face. And he's like, I mean, how much older is he than her? He's like 7 years older than her. I mean, she's like a little kid. He's like a big guy. And the culmination of it was, so my kids were alienated, which is part of the reason why I talk out as well, because I didn't know what it was. Like I knew about it a little bit. I didn't research it like I should have. I didn't seek help for it from experts that are out there, experts like Dr. Childress or Amy Baker, that can really help parents navigate if you have alienated children, how to deal with them. Because, your
it's something you don't think
like,
about until you're in it, until you're in the middle of it.
Your kid that loves you, that you held the hand of. My son held my hand until he was 10 years old, which is kind of old, right? Like at swim team, he'd reach over and grab my hand and stuff. I remember it. My kids that like wanted to cuddle with me or for me to read them books or watch movies with them, they're telling you, I hate you. I don't ever want to see you. Like showing up from being gone for a week, not seeing you, and showing up telling you I hate you. It's like, man, I can't even tell you what that feels like. I know there's people watching this and know that what it feels like. It feels so scary because you're trying to get your kids away from a horrible situation and you know how much it's hurting them and you cannot reach them. And it's also so scary that it makes you angry or terrified. Like I had, it creates anxiety. I have PTSD some, I'm a high functioning person, but I was in a violent, traumatic relationship. This whole situation of having my kids ripped out of my life. I don't know if that's really classified as PTSD, but what is it? It's a huge trauma. Losing a cow loses their calf and it's taken away. I mean, the cow mourns the calf. A cow like is freaking out trying to get to your calf. I'm a human being that losing your children is an undescribably, horrifically traumatic thing, especially when they're going to what is a very dangerous and toxic situation. Right. I'm just going to say it here. I don't ever talk about it. Alex married a prostitute. He moved a prostitute, a hooker in with my kids while this was going on. And they didn't have any problem with that or what my kids were exposed to. But they were worried about me because I was worried about my kids. And so cut to the chase. I had a camera in my face the whole time. There was a night my kids had been gone the whole week with Alex. My son showed up saying he hated me. My youngest child had bee stings all on her feet and had been dosed with Benadryl, but left to school like that. And so had my middle child was on Benadryl. They were doing that a lot, just giving them Benadryl. Are you kidding me? Like my kids, these kids. I mean, not to mention, Dan, the loss of intellectualism, the loss of culture. Right. My son, my incredibly articulate son was the most exuberant, joyous kid out there. He's so angry and hateful now. Like he's just so angry and he's a teenager. Some of it, and everybody wants to say, oh, it's just a teenager. No, your kids. Like nobody's going to say, I'm so disconnected from the culture or world or whatever that I don't know when it's normal with my kids. I'm sorry. I've got a huge circle of friends with kids. I'm a normal person. I'm just like as normal as anybody, right? Nobody's completely normal. But he loves science. He was a swimmer. My gosh, my son swam, I think 8 or 9 years, and he was just ripped out of the water. Like they just stopped swimming. They stopped doing gymnastics. My daughter had broken the pool record. Like fastest kid in Lakeway, Texas in the pool, my daughter. Awesome. Like so good. And not even the biggest, but the fastest for her heat or whatever, her age, whatever it was. Right. And just taken out of everything. So one day they showed up from school. Rex was saying, I can say his name, I guess, because he's been on the air. I hate that, by the way. Right. He's not supposed to put him on the air. I disagree with it. And my son is really angry with me right now for me speaking up about him being in the public eye, but it's not a normal exposure. It's not like a YouTube channel of whatever. And I'm sorry, he needs to be able to formulate his own identity outside of all this. He's a kid. And just like you wouldn't want your son, maybe Dan, if you were a baker, a donut man, okay, you're not going to be at 15 years old, maybe in old time Europe or something, you'd be like, okay, you're done. You're 15. We're going to go down to the basement. It's 4 a.m. You're going to go make the donuts. That's who you are. You're a baker. How many stories have been written about this really? Like how many fairy tales have the central theme? Like, no, but I want to be an actor, or whatever it is. I don't want to be a baker. Like kids need to form who they are. Right. So, the kids showed up. Rex was very hostile, very alienated. My youngest had bee stings on her feet because she was staying a lot with the grandparents in a 1-bedroom pool house, 1 bed. So that's 3 kids, 2 adults. My young daughters were co-sleeping with their grandfather in this weird arrangement on a bench. I mean, these people, like Alex is a millionaire, right. I have a full house with 3 bedrooms, 1 for each child here, just crazy town. But they were on Benadryl and I had to take them to an appointment and there was just hysteria. Like, he was saying horrible things and it was making my daughter mad, my middle daughter. So she was like kicking his seat and then that would make the youngest one cry. So it's just kind of pandemonium and it's out of control. Like it was just like chaos and it was just like misery, discord, like just horrible, like very upset kids, very upsetting to a parent. Right. So we come home. I called the guardian. I said, look, Rex is really acting alienated. I called all these people to try to get help. Nobody would come and help. And Rex, while this is happening, is running around with the camera, right? Which is just like, I'm terrified. I'm having an anxious moment. My heart is beating. Why is my child doing this? And so then Alex called. And I mean, it was, he still just harasses me every day. Anyhow, pretty much. little hyperbolic, but close to it.
Mhm.
Alex Jones still harasses me. He has people follow me. He has cameras pointed into my property.
I don't think anybody
He
would find that hard to believe, knowing Alex Jones.
It's horrible. I mean, on Mother's Day, he was sending me like these bizarre texts about what vitamins I need to give our children and telling me how I need to work on the relationship with our son that he's withheld for 6 months from court-ordered visitation.
Wow.
But anyhow, all this stuff was going on in the house. There was a call, court-ordered call. My daughter was talking to Alex, and she started lying about what was happening. She said, and I was going to take my youngest child to urgent care. And my middle child was like, she's going to die. I mean, it was just like hysteria. It was like, because they were having anxiety and they were very upset anyhow from, I guess, their weird life. These kids, like the trauma that these kids have been put through. I don't know how the people that have done this to children sleep at night. I don't know how they live with themselves. I don't know how Alex Jones's mom, Carol Jones, looks at herself in the mirror when she gets up in the morning, or his dad, David Jones, or his cousin, Buckley Hammond, or his cousins, Hester and Verna Hammond, or his aunt, Lil Hammond. All of you people, shame on you for what you've done to my kids, to Alex's and my kids. You know what you did. You are complicit and involved, and you are going to be seen for what you did, because what you did is a horror. You're monsters. All these people that think, they're just enablers. These are people that get millions of dollars from him, and they'll just like help him take kids.
So they're all fully aware of the situation and what.
Oh yeah, but now all of a sudden I'm like the worst person in the world to them, right?
Of course.
So what happened was, they were recording, and my daughter told Alex some lies, and I freaked out. I was like, "Why are you saying that? Why are you lying about me?" And I just had kind of like a parental meltdown that was maybe like one level, like not. It was pretty intense. I mean, I yelled at her.
Not Alex Jones level, I assume.
I don't think it was. It definitely wasn't Alex Jones.
Not slamming your fist on desks or anything.
No, absolutely not. But Alex was a destroyer of property. I'll tell you what, he's a scary guy.
Mm-hmm.
But anyhow, my son had it on iPad. Alex was waiting on the other side of my fence to receive the iPad. It was a total frame. It was totally framed. And the video was edited. The iPad has never been provided. It's just the shadiest thing. So then they're like, the Guardian's like, oh, you'll never see your kids again unless you leave town to Arizona to outpatient, not inpatient. Like, I'm not checking into the Looney Tune house. I'm just, not that that's bad. If you need inpatient, my heart goes out to you. Actually, that sounded terrible. And I think people need to normalize, mental illness, that
right.
Some people have mental illness, and it's not that they're bad for it. It's just that they have a sickness, right? But if their sickness is destructive to other people, that's when it's bad if they won't seek help.
Right.
Right. Like and the great tragedy of all of this is that Alex has serious, horrific problems that people are well aware of. And when the people that should have helped him, that could have cut to the chase and helped him get assistance, they did none of that for him. Nobody's helped him. He's been fed on by greedy attorneys who are amping up the conflict still as we speak, probably today writing something. Probably, I guarantee you they are. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, this Guardian's like, go to Arizona. Okay, that is, I think it's illegal. I know it's illegal for her to have my son record me in the house, mm-hmm. but I was desperate for my kids, and she was so a guardian has quasi-judiciary power, which means that they decide everything. It's their recommendation that the judge is going to follow. The judge is really going to listen to this person more than pursue any evidence, right? So I said, okay. And my own counsel, which I'll just talk about it. I guess I'm breaking privilege. Horrible malpractice. Let's just say, like, was really horrible to me. And so I went to Arizona. I went there to try to be compliant. And the second I left, my case was bifurcated, which means that it was split into money and kids, right? Custody and financial. Alex filed the second I was kicked out of town. He filed for sole managing conservator, and for me to never have any contact with the kids ever at all, except with his permission, which I don't know if you recall the press conference that he gave after the jury trial, where he said, I never filed to take my kids from my wife. If only she could get better, and all this stuff, right?
I don't think I saw it. But yeah.
I'm sorry to mock him like that. That's terrible. That's not Alex Jones, right?
It's all right.
That's like
I mock him all the time, so you're welcome to.
and Shrek or something. But anyhow, no, he filed over and over again to keep me from my kids, and has made my life a life of defending myself from horrible, malicious, vexatious litigation. But he filed for sole managing, and my business, our business, was valued to my exclusion, where they only talked to Alex and his dad. I mean, his dad had never worked for us until then. All of a sudden, his dad's working, get this big job, come in and restructure everything, whatever.
Right.
And I was so frantically just only concerned about getting my kids that I was very participatory in all the therapy that I had to go through. And actually, I found it very assistive. I mean, I was going through a horrible trauma. I would say that some of it was demeaning and definitely unnecessary, but I did learn a lot through the process. And, ended up coincidentally being forced into over 800 hours of therapy, which is the equivalent of 40 years in 2 years, which I think is psychological torture, But anyhow, I was so focused on getting my kids back that the money thing went by the wayside. I lost almost everything in the business. And I accepted a mediated settlement agreement again, which was a step-up plan to 50-50 with my kids. I accepted it under duress. I told the judge that I thought that he was a good judge, which in hindsight, what I know now, I don't know about some of his decisions. I know that he did allow that MSA to be entered when I said clearly that I was only accepting it because I was so worried about the power of the guardian who had ignored broken bones, incidents of exposure that I'm not going to talk about here. Had been so grossly negligent and was so biased against me that I felt like I would get a worse deal, like if it were up to her. So under duress, I accepted this MSA, which at the time, you're not going to believe the story is so crazy. I'm writing a book about it. And of course, I have a website, custodywars.com. I'm tweeting a lot right now. I'm at AlexJones_X. And, my purpose, again, is to try to show people how bad family court can be. But turns out that the attorney that I had at the time representing me, who solicited my business or tried to get my business to be my attorney, was secretly working on 2 cases as a partner with Alex's family attorney. I mean, that is just so unbelievably corrupt. It's not even funny. So he told me, accept this thing, put this woman on your case. Her name is Alyssa Sherry. She is like one of the most notorious bad actors in Austin. She's had at least 5 complaints at the Texas State Board of Examiners and Psychologists. And there's a lot of really interesting tweets going on right now about Alyssa Sherry, who's now posing in wet t-shirt type poses. I mean, she's a family forensic psychologist and bragging about, buying a Tesla and all of this stuff. I tweeted to her, I said, how many children's tears does a red Tesla cost?
Ooh.
How much grief does it cost? But I accepted this MSA. Yes. Oh, the question. Yeah, it's horrible. So she came on and, the MSA I accepted was written into a divorce decree that I never saw or signed, and I didn't know about it until it was past the time for me to appeal it. So all of a sudden I had this decree that I didn't know existed. I couldn't go back to the court and say, this isn't what I agreed to. And the terms it's like the most convoluted thing in the world. Like, people who have seen my divorce decree who are attorneys are like, they've never seen anything like it. It's like a novel. It's crazy. But there was a step-up plan to 50-50 with this case manager at the home, but no benchmarks. There were no like, do this and you get your kids this much more, do that and you get your kids this much more. No, there was none of that. In fact, it was totally up to her perception. And her only power when she came on, according to the decree, was to move me up or down through the steps and to schedule the kids and stuff like this. Instead, she presented herself to be a guardian, and she came in and did horrific things, including I had my youngest sooner, like on overnight, some of my other ones. She took them away because she said that the older ones felt like she was my favorite or something. I mean, it's clear that I didn't set up the 2 tracks. And I feel like that was one of these alienating things that the therapists were actually feeding to my kids. I mean, the therapists clearly told my kids things that were alienating, including to record me, which is just like the most alienating thing. What does that tell a child to say you've got to record your mom at all times, right? And by the way, I mean, this is Mr. Big Brother Alex Jones, like endorsing all of this crazy behavior. But another thing that the therapist told my kids, there was a previous group with Allison Wilcox, and then another group came in. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars, these people. They told they wanted the old therapists were going to stay on with the new guardian lady. It's so boring to talk about. It was so complicated. But they wanted me to sign a release, which they already had a release for me to talk to each other, or whatever. Well, they wanted me to sign a new release that they then wrote that had Allison Wilcox back on it. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to sign that. There's no way I would have ever taken the MSA in the first place if I had ever thought. And Alyssa Sherry told me she'd never talked to Allison Wilcox, but in fact she did over and over again. And Wilcox was feeding her toxic information. So this confirmation bias went over here, although Alyssa Sherry is a liar for hire and would have probably been biased against me no matter what. And so when I was saying is that she said that my youngest child felt like, or my older two felt it was favoritism. So she took away my overnights with my 6-year-old, like really, or maybe she was barely 7 then, I guess. And my kid's like, what's going on? I want to be with my mom, and I'm going, well, I don't know, and so I was compliant with everything she did. And what I did is I had a new attorney and he said, keep your child overnight according to the court order. It was my court order time. She didn't have authority to change my time. I didn't have to follow her recommendations. And I said, well, I don't know about that because they're going to say I'm kidnapping her. It's horrible or something. But I mean, I had it in the order, like the legal order. And he said, no, just do it. And I said, well, I want to tell them I'm doing it. And he said, no, don't communicate. It's your time. And so I kept my daughter overnight according to my court order time. And during the time I was communicating even to my attorney then, I want to say something to them because they're freaking out, right? Because I wasn't like returning her. And he said, do nothing. Well, that was my big strike, right? But the thing is that Alyssa Sherry saw the emails and texts that said, I don't want to do this, right? So instead of being like, oh, they're like, oh, you're crazy because you followed your attorney's advice. It's like, it was my court ordered time. So basically I could do no right with her. That was my first strike. Other strikes with Alyssa Sherry. I mean, this is how I literally lost my kids. And I want to tell you about how she controlled my life and ruined and like the gauntlet I had to run to see my kids, which is I have spent hundreds of hours on supervised visitation, people following me and my kids around with a clipboard, everything I say, everything I do. There are supervisors that quit from my case because they were so uncomfortable. They saw what was going on and they said, I can't be a part of this. She said something like, you need to get more bad notes on Kelly. You're not writing enough bad things. There was a therapeutic team incepted that consisted of the case manager, multiple supervisors, like 3 supervisors, a supervisor business owner, the individual therapist she put on me, my children's therapist, so 2 more. It was like 8 people meeting to talk about me. Did they talk about Alex Jones at all? No. It was just like, what could she possibly be doing that's wrong? And they met over and over again and they had meetings. They've destroyed their notes. They've destroyed their recordings of the meetings. Remember Allison Wilcox over here, she's destroyed all her records, which is a complete violation of her licensure. But the other strikes I have against me, and I mean, I see your flag there in the background. I was at an arbitration that followed that event of me keeping my child. And there was something that happened during the arbitration. So the judge, this is actually official oppression. I believe it's a crime. His name is Judge Warney. And I believe that the government should investigate this, or, I believe that the FBI should look into this. I mean, he should be held accountable for a criminal act because he said, okay, I can't rule on your case the way that this arbitration is set up in the decree. Remember the decree I didn't see. I would never have agreed to Judge Warney being my arbitrator, right? So he said, but I just need a little bit more power. Just give me a little bit more power and I will rule. And I was like, no. I was like, no, I'm not going to give Judge Warney, who took my entire business, my life away from me, my kids. Why would I want to give Judge Warney more power? That would be really foolish, right? So I'm sitting here. I've got one of my expert consultants here and I've got my attorney here. And I'm telling my attorney, I'm like, no, don't give Judge Warney more power. Right. You can't really talk in legal proceedings. It's very like, and I always present well in court and have been really controlled and everything, but we're in a private arbitration. It's not even a court thing. By the way, when I was with Judge Warney previously, we weren't even in court. I didn't even know about other family court things because we had our meetings in the W Hotel and fancy expensive conference rooms and in 100 Congress in private expensive rooms with like tea service and stuff. Crazy. So I'm telling my attorney no, And then he agrees. He starts to agree. And the judge starts to rule. And I said, hold on. I'm like, I'm sitting right here and I'm upset. Horrible things have been said by Alyssa Sherry. It's a horrible moment. Alex has said terrible things about me. And he's laughing at me, by the way. Alex like looks at me, laughs at me, mocks me, does the most inappropriate,
the most Alex Jones typical stuff that we would all expect.
It's contempt of court, and he's
Right.
never been once called on it. I mean,
Right.
he's like literally at the jury trial. He's like getting up out of his chair, huffing and puffing. I mean,
Really?
he accosted a paralegal in the elevator.
Really,
just crazy stuff. But anyhow, I say, wait a second, I'm here. No. And Alex's little Poindexter attorney, who's unethical as all get out, Randy Wilhite, stands up because he goes, well, it's a Rule 11 agreement and your attorney started to agree. I said, that's ridiculous. And I went on like, I don't think it's an Alex Jones tirade. I think it's an American sovereign tirade where I said, I have due process rights. This is unconstitutional. This is a big money scam. I did not agree to this arbitration. And I just kind of went off. And it was like me engaging in pointing out that my whole constitutional rights have been violated. And that event was edited out of context, given to the therapeutic team by Alyssa Sherry. So I lost my kids for that event, which, by the way, the judge then took my child away. And the keeping of my youngest child with court order. And then the third event, the big evil event, was that I had my middle child on visitation, and she was looking. I had like a happy thank you card with a dog with the birthday hat on it on my counter, and she's like, "Oh, Mama, let me see it." Now, remember that the supervisor had quit because she wouldn't want to be involved with it. There was another supervisor who was still available, but she was no longer being called. Alyssa Sherry handpicked an unlicensed intern who didn't even have the qualifications or the legal right to be supervising a therapeutic role, whatever, at my home. Handpicked her for the supervision team, which is a separate entity, supposedly, right? It doesn't seem like it is. If the case manager is picking for this other team, right, to supervise me, this person comes over. My daughter's looking at the card, and she said, "Let me see that first. Let me take a picture." And my daughter was like, "Why?" Like my, big blue green eyes. Why?
Right.
And, just this a little heart, and you're just going, oh my gosh, you just want to, it's infuriating, right? Like this stranger in your home making your child feel uncomfortable. I said, child, go out to the front yard, because my house is on a cliff. So I have my back is real separate from my front. We had a puppy. I was like, go play with the puppy. And so I went out on the back porch and I called somebody who had worked for me for many years. And I said, I need you to come over here and be a witness, because I don't trust what this woman's going to write.
Right.
And she came out while I was on the phone talking to my person, which is not her job. Her job is to watch me with my kid. My kid was in the front yard, not her position. She comes over and starts talking to me. I said, please do not speak to me. I'm on the phone trying to get a witness. I do not want to talk to you without a witness present. And she called Alyssa Sherry. The visit was canceled. And basically after that, I saw my kids. I don't know. I got to a point where I had them like 2 hours a week each. They had to drive to see me. My kids had to drive like an hour and a half each. They were all taken to each appointment. So my kids were basically living in a hot car in Texas to go to a supervised exchange where I was treated like, a prisoner, to receive my child for 2 hours during rush hour traffic, where the only place to go was the mall, which it took 20 minutes to get to with the traffic. And my kids have been put through such rigors that, who would blame any kid just even for being like, man, I don't want to be involved with that anymore. I want to go do whatever. And that's morphed into
go hang out on TV with Dad.
Yeah. I want to go get a Gucci belt, Daddy. Buy it for me. Okay, honey. I need more donations to go buy. I'm sorry. I don't want to be rude, but my kids there's very poor choices being made about designer goods for a 13-year-old.
Sure.
That's all I have to say. So that's sort of the thing in the nutshell. I was going to talk a little bit about the rigors of it. And, I've kind of got my spiel down where I talk about this a lot. So I know my story and the facts pattern, but 40 years of therapy in 2 years, I was treated like everything about me was constantly on, being analyzed, and I was constantly having to show how proactive and how much I wanted to, be involved. And I have never been diagnosed with anything. I don't have borderline personality disorder. They all tried to say it, they've tried to say things like that I have Munchausen by proxy, because I believe that my child, when she has a broken toe and it gets a protective boot, should be able to wear it rather than being yelled at her father and told that she doesn't have a broken bone.
Gosh.
I believe that my child, when she has pneumonia, after Alex has had 2 family members die of untreated pneumonia, when Alyssa Sherry lied about speaking to the doctor and said that they don't need follow-up care or that they're being properly taken care of when they weren't, and it was my 2 children, but one of them was diagnosed with pneumonia. I believe that there's no way to describe what it's like to not be able to take care of your child when you really believe that they could be in deathly danger. And just to see my children, like on a weekend, I think I had them 6 hours total on a Saturday with the supervisor, right? I had them 2 hours each in different configurations. And I would have to drive from my home here to South Austin, which is, 40 minutes, 45 minutes in traffic, maybe an hour in traffic, both ways, to see them for 2 hours because they'd want to come home. They wanted to be at their house, and I do that. What is that? 6 times. Back and forth 6 times in one day with a supervisor in a hot car in Texas in 100-degree heat under a sign that Alex put up at the intersection that said, "You are the resistance."
Gosh. Yep.
So this is what I've been put through, but it's really not about me. It's about my kids. And like I said, I hope that you got some of the information about the corrupt actors and their power. I know of so many people right now in Austin, Texas, and in Texas actually, because Alyssa Sherry's had to branch out into smaller counties because I think she's been kind of found out to be a bad actor, or people know that people know she's a bad actor, so she's on the out list, but the other bad actors are still, doing their nasty deeds. This is interference with child custody for hire. It's a crime. I think a lot of people talk about it as child trafficking, which is maybe offensive to some people, but some kids I know their parents are left in with people that are molesting them. I mean, I'm sorry to say that. I've seen the evidence, and it is a horror. These people that are doing it do it over and over again. And I believe that one person, Alyssa Sherry, is about to be, there's so many people that have joined together and there's just so outrage, why do I've made amazing connections with wonderful people through all this. And the thing is, like, I think all of us feel like as long as there's a monster on the street, and, everybody wants to say the monster's Alex Jones. I mean, Alex Jones is his own deal, right? But the monster is a person that gives Alex Jones a tool, in what should be a sheltered environment. So, yeah, that's pretty much my story. There's a lot more to it, but that's sort of the bones of it. And you're the one who got the most of it, I think. I hope it was what you wanted.
Loved it. Yeah. And glad to be able to share it. Because, I mean, you said, I think it was during a break, but you said that, everybody wants to get the dirt on Alex Jones' story and everything. And it is out there, and we can dig into it a little bit. But, I mean, your story is, the important thing. The reason why people care about you is because of Alex Jones, but they need to see that Alex Jones is not only a real guy, but he's a guy who's, not the hero that he makes himself out to be, or the victim that he makes himself out to be.
A guy who's embracing corrupt actors that he knows are corrupt in a system that he said is evil, and using it against his own children. I mean, what could be worse than that? A guy who says he's about the Constitution and due process and free speech. Alex has filed repeatedly to block my free speech. Repeatedly. I can't even tell you how many times. I'm in federal court right now on a civil liberties plea to the government. Please don't let this case in state court go forward. My civil liberties have been violated. They've been violated by Alex and the judge and all these people that have done these actions, but they've empowered him to do this, basically. So, Travis County is in a mess and we need some help. And I hope that people will care about my story. I hope they'll care about my friend Dawn's story. Dawn had the same judge, hasn't seen her kid in, I don't know, I think it's over a year, has been in litigation for something like 12 years. I hope they'll care about my friend Rachel. Rachel had the same judge. Her child has been presumably adopted and is a missing person. Rachel has got nothing wrong with her. She was thrown in jail by that judge. I hope they'll listen to these people that call me that I can't talk about that are in court now and have to come up against the lies of Alyssa Sherry, who presents herself as a UT professor and some esteemed forensic psychologist with her huge, long Santa's list of all of her appointments and things, when she is a monster for hire. I hope that people will care about family court corruption, because it isn't just about me and them and ours and us. It's about y'all and yours. And family court is going to probably touch your life in some way. Hopefully, not in the way it's touched ours, but there's a lot of serious problems in family court across the country. And particularly, I can speak on a personal level in Travis County, Texas.
Absolutely. And I don't want to keep you here too long, because you've been more than gracious with your time. Would you mind recording just a short, maybe 15, 20-minute segment for our patrons afterwards?
Sure.
Okay. Well, that would be fantastic, and I'd really appreciate it. And I appreciate you so much for being here. I'm sure all my conspiracy listeners are yelling at me for, not getting down deep into the Alex Jones stuff like everybody else wants to. But once again, I want you to share what you have to share.
Dan, I appreciate. I'm sorry I interrupted you because of the connection. I'm so sorry. I appreciate the opportunity so much, and I will get into the conspiracy thing. I want people to know that I am a pretty conservative lady at heart. I've reached out a lot to the left, and I found a lot of great support there because I need help. I need interest, and I'm really kind of like a moderate person. But the thing I believe in fundamentally, and I go back to this thing that I think I learned from Alex, is that classical liberal perspective. We are Americans with constitutional rights. That's the foundation of our country. I'm about freedom, privacy, autonomy, and all these things were taken by Alex Jones through family court.
Right.
So just tell me what you want for that 15-minute segment. I'll be available to you, Dan, to talk about conspiracy whenever you want.
All right. Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for being here. Before we jump into the bonus, go ahead and tell everybody where they can find out all the information about you and your website and everything that you got going on.
Yes, Dan, thank you so much. My website is custodywars.com. You can find me online at Twitter at AlexJones_X and at KellyJones on Facebook, or at Custody Hero, as much as Facebook is a questionable venue.
Sure.
I will say, if you're a family court victim, that's a great place to connect with other people. There's a huge community of family court victims. If you are questioning anything I've said or want more information about family court injustice, just come follow me and see it in my public page and see who's following my public page and what they're talking about. And please look at how this is a national crisis.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for being here. And if anybody out there has any way that they can pitch in and help Kelly in this situation, I would more than recommend it, because it's an uphill battle, it sounds like, and it's a scary one for sure. But Kelly, thank you so much for your time, and you're welcome here whenever you'd like.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, if you're not a member of the Downers Club, then you're missing out, because that's where we talked about all the crazy conspiracy stuff. I asked her about Alex Jones's products, whether or not his supplements are real, whether or not Alex Jones is controlled opposition, whether or not Alex Jones is a racist, and I've heard a few other people ask similar questions to those, but I've never, ever heard in any of the interviews somebody ask her about whether or not Alex Jones is in fact Bill Hicks. But you know me, when I say let's get weird, I mean let's get weird, and you gotta know I had to ask her about the Bill Hicks theory. If you're not familiar with it, it's weird. It's very bizarre. So we got into all that stuff in the bonus segment, and you can get access to that by going to tsidpod.com/support and joining the Downers Club. And again, the Downers Club is how we keep this show going. I cannot do this show if some of the financial expenses are not covered. And I mean, we don't make a lot. I don't pocket any of this money. It all goes back into making this show bigger and better and a more enjoyable viewing and listening experience for you guys. So you got nothing to lose here. You got everything to gain, because we do multiple bonus episodes every single week. You get access to our exclusive Facebook group. And at some levels, you get free merch and all sorts of other things. So again, go join the Downers Club at tsidpod.com/support and be a part of something bigger than yourself. And I would like to give a shout out to our latest member to join the Downers Club, Rachel Roberts. Thank you so much for your support. I greatly appreciate it. And to the rest of you, Be like Rachel. And of course, if you'd like to join the conversations for absolutely free, you can go join our forum at tsidpod.com/forum. That's where we talk about all these weird topics, conspiracies, politics, religion, and much, much more. It's a group of strange, civil people who like to have disagreements, discussions, and just talk about all the crazy nonsense in the world. It is a very friendly environment, and it all exists deep inside of Facebook, which I know sounds wrong. Just sounds far-fetched to think that people are talking on Facebook and not shouting at each other, calling names. But they are. It's a great place to talk about these things. People who have weird beliefs similar to or the same or even different than your own. So go join that. tsidpod.com/forum, and all the links to all of this stuff are in the show notes, in the show description, and all that stuff. Also, this week, while you're scrolling through the interwebs and killing time, just take a minute to head over to iTunes and leave us a nice review and let people know what they're going to get in this show. If you like it, let them know. If you don't like it, I guess go ahead and let them know that too. Just be honest, it's fine. But yeah, do that and do all the stuff that millennials do by liking, sharing, subscribing, all that stuff on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And most importantly, as always, please just go out and talk to somebody this week. Our goal here is to change the world by just having conversations with people that we disagree with and talking about uncomfortable topics and not being douchebags. I know it seems like a lot to ask, but try it. It's not that hard. So do that and tell somebody about the show. I love you guys. I really appreciate you supporting the show and just helping get the word out there. Even just listening for free. You taking joy in it brings me joy. And I've got a lot of great episodes for you in the works and a lot of big plans for you coming down the pipe. So won't you join me next week as we do this all over again? If you'll have me, I'll be right back here in your ears with some more uncomfortable conversations. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, question everything and stay uncomfortable. Thanks. This has been a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.